welcome to the How to Be a Money Magpie podcast. I'm money expert Jasmine Birtles, the founder of MoneyMagpie.com. And as you know, if you've been listening to our other episodes, we believe in making money as well as saving it, finding really fun and interesting ways of building up reserves of cash, as well as being clever and thoughtful at spending it. We're also big believers in sharing the money we have. As I like to say to anyone who'll listen, money is like manure. It only does good if you spread it around. Otherwise, it's just a stinking pile of mess. And today, we're looking at the psychology of money and how we can overcome bad money habits. We thought, who could tell us more about that? And of course, we thought of the wonderful Dr. Linda Papadopoulos. Dr. Linda is one of the most well-known and respected psychologists working in the UK today, and she's constantly on our TVs in her own series and also appearing on magazine and news programmes. So, hello, Linda. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. So tell me first, before we talk about the psychology of money, Linda, tell me about the work you're doing at the moment. Am I right in thinking that you specialise in skin and how this is affected by our thoughts and feelings?
Well, yeah, so my PhD was in something called psychoneuroimmunology, which is just kind of a big way of saying that our thoughts aren't intangible things. They affect our biochemistry, they affect our nervous system, and therefore our physiology. So I looked at skin specifically, but I think anyone who has gone through stress knows very well it affects their tummy, it affects their skin, it affects the way they feel pain. And I think we're understanding a lot more now about this kind of, we used to keep the mind and body quite separate, but now we're kind of understanding those bridges a lot more, and it's great to see.
Yes, absolutely. Do you think that we're making some advances in this area now? Because it must, I would have thought, take some of the burden off the NHS, frankly, if people realise just how much is affected by thought and feelings.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, again, I think people go through life kind of, wondering why they feel certain ways and why they feel negative. And actually, if you get a handle of how you're thinking, how you're, what you're using with your consciousness. I mean, are you curating your consciousness, or are you reading sort of negative articles all day long? Are you kind of speaking to people that bring you down? All of these things will inevitably have an impact on how you experience the world, but also, again, on physiological mechanisms, on your adrenal glands, on the cortisol levels in your body. And this, in turn, will have an effect on certain functions, especially if you have a predisposition to a particular illness. So I think getting your head around it, it's the same thing with, I guess it's the approach to health. It's more, biological, psychological, and social, right? None of these illnesses occur in a vacuum. Think about everything from how you're eating to how you're sleeping to what you're thinking. And all of a sudden that illness becomes potentially more manageable.
Gosh, yes. And I mean, obviously, we're talking about money in this podcast. So if we move from a very interesting area of body and health, etc., to our spending habits, I guess it's a bit more obvious there that psychology affects it, although a lot of the modelling that's done by economists, etc., tends to assume that we're logical and that we behave in logical ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you study human behavior, one thing you quickly realize is, that we're actually much less logical than we assume. We kind of tend to think through our emotions. We tend to, decision making is absolutely affected by things like fear and anxiety. So, having an understanding in terms of, your decision making around money, why we spend, what we spend on, why it's difficult to save, why it's easy to spend. All of those things have to do, to a large extent, with how sort of evolution and socialization have kind of worked together to, to bring us to a place where delayed gratification is actually really hard. And immediate reinforcement is very, very rewarding.
Yeah, because I mean, I am aware of the forces against us, if you like, as consumers, and they are getting cleverer and cleverer. There are people who are doing psychology specifically to learn how to press our buttons, how to stop us thinking and just spend without just, thinking it through, as I say. Do you have any tips, any mechanisms that we can protect ourselves with against these forces as I see them?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things that we can do. I think if you're talking about the online world, so we know that there's things called persuasive technology units that are designed, like you say, to keep us on platforms, and it could be platforms where you're watching films or gaming, or it can be platforms where you're spending time, spending money, right? So understanding. Number one, how that these exist, but also very importantly, how you as an individual tend to kind of function around them. So we know, for example, that a lot of online purchases are made late in the evening. Now, what's going on psychologically then? Well, we've had a long day, we're unwinding, we're in that headspace of like, well, I deserve it. We're not necessarily kind of feeling the money go out, and we know there's just one of the most replicated studies is that it's easier to spend money on plastic than it is with cash. And there's a very obvious reason for that. It very basically, you see your wallet getting thinner when it's cash. On a credit card, wallet looks exactly the same. You don't feel it, you just feel the reward. So understanding how these things, when you're shopping, why you might be shopping, the methods that you're using to shop, all of these things absolutely can be hacked. But also, if you understand them, then you can kind of shift those things around. For example, kind of waiting between when you put something in a basket and going into checkout, right? So doing that, during the first part of the day where you're much more alert, thinking twice, sleeping on whether you need it or not. Writing down your purchases. I know we're going towards a cashless society, but writing down what you're spending, being aware, not kind of putting it in the back of your mind. And also thinking about how you're influenced. Why do I want what I want? Like, do I really want what I want?
Yes.
Asking those questions.
So much of it, I guess, from what you're saying is using that word that keeps being bandied about, being mindful about what you're spending, what you're doing, actually conscious of it rather than unconscious, which, yeah, as I said, is what these marketers are trying to make us be, just not thinking. So you're kind of saying think more.
Yeah, think more, pause, ask yourself questions. I mean, I think it's actually not just think more, it's think critically, right? So,
Hmm.
and again, the whole area of shopping these days, you're not just up against a bunch of people around sort of, a table and advertising them. You're up against people like me who have lots of PhDs and lots of time on, all they do is research human behavior, and they know very well, and then some of the best technologists in the world. I mean, we all know now that if you and I were to speak about, I don't know, red shoes, and all of a sudden we'd find those red shoes on our feed. We'd find sort of, buy now and get two pairs for free. We're up against a technology that, in many ways, and I think here's the thing, I think in many ways our technological evolution has outpaced our social evolution. So being aware of how these things play into getting you to scratch that itch will make you less likely to do so, or at least you'll have some kind of, thinking around it.
What about saving? Because again, I have read, and I can't remember where it was, but I have read of studies that found that we actually get a better hit, dopamine hit, whatever, from saving than we do from spending, or we can in some circumstances. Have you heard this?
I've not heard it, but again, I wouldn't be surprised. To me, it all depends on it being tangible, right? So again, we respond to that tangibility of it. And again, from an evolutionary perspective, it would make sense to, be able to look in your cave and see that you have enough, reserves of berries to feed your kids for the winter. There's got to be something there. The problem is, I think that the way that the human behavior works is that what tends to happen is when you're doing any sort of positive behavior, it tends to be that that the costs are immediate and the benefits are long term, right? And that's where delayed gratification comes in. So if I'm putting whatever, 10% of my wages away every month, that kind of means I can't go out as often as I want. I can't maybe buy the whatever that I want. ultimately that kind of hits, very, very quickly. And the benefit isn't like at the end of the year, maybe I would have paid off a bit of my mortgage, or whatever the case may be. What you need to do is turn that around. So when you're saving, you need somehow to bring the benefit forward, so that behaviorally what you're doing is you're reinforcing yourself. And there's a couple of ways of doing it. I think actually physically looking at it, we're going back to the thick wallet thing, right? Actually physically having a number and saying, whoa, I was at, X amount of pounds now, but, X plus whatever amount of pounds. And that's kind of going up, having those little micro goals within that. That's very reinforcing. Reminding yourself what the big goal is. That's very reinforcing, but also having micro ambitions in between, right? So, and I think that's, it's sort of like the same thing with losing weight. No one gets up and runs a 10K like after they've been on the couch for a year. You've got to, reward yourself for going around the block. It's the same thing. You're saving up to buy a house. That's really scary. Like, houses cost a lot of money. Instead, break it down. How much am I going to feel good about to save this month, in 6 months, in a year? So the smaller chunks, the easier it is for us to feel good about it.
Excellent. Yeah. So shorter goals, big goals, and then broken down into tighter goals, so that we feel, as you say, we have it reinforced.
Yeah, it's those micro ambitions, right? So you kind of have your big goal, but what are the small things? What are the doable things that you can feel good about in the here and now?
How about having a rich mindset? I'm just trying to think. There was a famous book. It was about, early last century. It was called Think and Grow Rich. Napoleon, somebody, I can't remember, but it was massively popular at the time. And I've seen books here and there. Occasionally it comes up. Hey, if you just think yourself rich, you'll be fine. It is true, though, that if you have a positive mindset, you're more likely to attract wealth and all sorts of things. Isn't that the case, would you say?
Yeah, and I don't think it's because of these sort of like mysterious, let's all kind of mumbo jumbo ideas. I think you kind of tend to hear with these books saying, "Oh, if you just wish it enough." I think what you're speaking about is just makes a lot of sense. If you're open and positive, you are much more likely to see opportunities. People are much more likely to want to work with you. You are much more likely to see setbacks as learning opportunities rather than as chances to give up. So that mindset allows you to become wealthy, not because of some magical thing that you're going to, attract it, it's going to come in a sort of metaphysical way, but in a really practical way. People like positive people. Positive people tend to be much more resilient. Positive people tend to be much more determined. And these are precisely the things that lead us to success.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about, basically opening your eyes to things, because this is something we say in Money Magpie a lot, that it's all there. It really is. I mean, if you just think about where we live, we do genuinely live in a land of plenty, and yet we have enormous poverty, as well as enormous riches. And it does seem that it's there. We just need to open our eyes to it, and share it a bit more as well, to be honest.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think there is something about that idea of opening your eyes to it and sharing. And there's I think there's so many lovely things actually that came out of COVID, and you've seen people do some amazing things. I mean, simply because you look around, and I think again that brings you other things that just a different perspective, and that perspective allows you to question how you're doing. Because again, going back to the spending, it makes you think twice about that. Like, where am I putting my resources, not just financially, but in terms of my time and my energy and my effort.
And your daughter's doing this at the moment. I'm massively impressed. Dear heart, she's giving, and some of her friends. Tell me about what she's doing.
Oh, my daughter, I've got to say, beyond proud of her. She set up something called mentorjunior.com, which basically started, she was organized a few of her friends to go and give free tutoring to kids in the area. When COVID happened, she brought it online. And now she's giving somewhere in the region of 200 hours of free tutoring to the kids that need it most from around the world. It's an online platform, mentorjunior.com. It's completely free. And it was very much about this. It was about evening out the educational playing field. She came in when they said it's ridiculous that there's such a disparity between the support that kids get educationally. And it's run by everyone's a sixth form or first year of university, but they give up their time for primary school kids. And I think during lockdown, it was huge. And again, that's a wonderful example, because it was fascinating to see, Jasmine, because like there's parents calling back and saying, can I do something for you, Jesse? Can I design your logo? There was lawyers saying, can I help you with it? Policies. There was, parents saying, now my kid can speak to someone who's a first language speaker and they never had that. The most amazing things. And I think that's what, this whole idea that I love with the stuff that you do with sort of Money Magpie is this idea of just look around. When you look around and look at what you can do, I think as a community, we do begin to lift each other up and new opportunities arise.
Absolutely, yes, and I think this is such a good message to all of us, and we all need to be reminded. As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, yeah, remember this, Jasmine. You know it. Remember this. That the more you give, the more you get. It is, as you say, in practical terms, it is genuinely true.
It absolutely is. You've got to remember we're social creatures. We're not made to survive on our own, and as a consequence, we've kind of developed mechanisms where when we see somebody giving back, which is why I guess we're attracted also to kind of companies where we think that this seems fair, right? When something seems fair, you're happy to, even to get, to pay a little bit more for your coffee if you know that the people that are picking the coffee beans are getting a piece of that. That feels like a fair thing to do. So it is, and it's wonderful to see that kind of a bit more of a conscious coming out of it. But again, it can be done no matter your age, no matter what industry you're in. And I think it is about freeing yourself from looking at just your own issues, because I think firstly, so many of these issues we all share, like we all fear, we all want to be, the best for ourselves, for our kids. But I think beyond that, it's making those connections, because, none of us are an island. And if we can work together and share information and data and all of this, it really helps.
Actually, going back to what we were saying right at the beginning, do you find that people who are generous, who are thinking of others, who are giving, that they often have better health? Do you find this in your studies, or have you not seen that?
Absolutely. So generosity is a wonderful one, in terms of, I think what it does is it kind of, again, it frees you from your own pain, kind of looking at others. So I think we see that generosity and positivity go definitely hand in hand. Actually, there's some really interesting studies as well that look at well-being and what you spend your money on. So apparently spending your money on things is very different from spending your money on experiences. So whereas when you spend your money on a thing, you get a boost and that lasts for a little while, it's short-lived. Spending your money on an experience, especially with friends, actually holds you in much better stead, because you're able to relive it and think back on it and speak about it again and look at the photos. And I think that's very telling as well, the idea that when we share something, it lasts longer.
Before we go, let me. What would you think are your main sort of 2 or 3 tips for having a healthy relationship with your money and probably increasing your wealth over time?
I think, first of all, don't put your head in the sand. I think one of the biggest problems that we find is that people, and this is true of any kind of sort of good mental health, if there's an issue, it's important you address it. And we know that money, one of the hard things is when you get those emails or those bills, is to try and ignore them. The sooner you stop ignoring them, the better. So have some clarity about what's going out, what's coming in. The second thing that I would say is very much, be on top of how you spend. Look at your own behavioral patterns. So if you see that actually doing an online shop and having a regular amount works best for me, because that means I don't go down the aisles and put more than I want, and do that. If I spend money when I'm tired, stay off the shopping thing sites when you're tired. So kind of getting an idea of who you are. And finally, I would say, be realistic with your goals. So, sometimes it can feel really daunting when you're trying to save or when you're trying to, do better in some way. So, small steps that approximate to your big goal, we know behaviorally tend to work best.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much, Linda. Now, I know that you're on our TV screens at the moment, a couple of your series, is that right?
Yes, on Netflix. We've got a couple of series on Netflix.
Thank you so much, Linda. And if you'd like to keep up to date with what Linda is up to, you can check out drlinda.co.uk. Nice, easy website to know about. Now, we've been scouring our message boards and social media for the best tips of the week, and we've managed to have a chat with our Money Magpies about their money habits. Have a listen to this.
My name is Ed. I'm originally from Norfolk. I'm an apprentice. I have a lot of bad money habits. I'm generally very bad with money. The main one being, probably quite a common one amongst people, is spending more money than I earn. I don't have an approach to money, and I think about it when there's not any there every second 2 weeks of the month after being paid. Money in itself doesn't mean a lot to me. Like, I have no real urge to have just lots of money, but stuff, as in objects, physical things, that does have a lot of value to me. So money being transferred into possessions is probably what I would do with it. Yeah, there is definitely an emotional response there. I've got a whole living room full of bikes which have all been purchased in that way. eBay, that's a big impulse spender for me, just because the excitement of getting caught up in bidding on something, and you just want to win it even though you just don't need it. So it's like I'm literally surrounded by boxes of bike parts and stuff that I've paid for but I'm not using. It's like a drug. It's like, yes, this feels fantastic, and then immediately 5 minutes later you're like, why did I buy that? That's stupid. I don't go on eBay or Amazon drunk anymore, but that is how I've spent a lot of money in the past. But I've moved on from that. I'm more mature now. The best financial decision I ever made was learning to drive. So at university, I came into a sum of money from a dead grandmother, and instead of just blowing it on bikes and tat, which was obviously my natural reaction, like just spend it on something, I spent that money on driving lessons, which has meant that I could do loads of other interesting things with my life. Bad financial decisions. I'll take you through a few of them. My car is very old and rusty. It's from 1991. That's quite a bad financial decision because every year to get it through its MOT needs generally at least 400 quid's worth of work. Yeah, old guitars and music equipment, just anything that depreciates rapidly. I don't think I've ever bought something that has been a good investment.
Oh, there's an object lesson for a start. How would you deal with that guy, Linda? I'm glad he's not on Amazon and eBay drunk anymore, I have to say.
I was going to say, I'd start with that.
Yeah.
Look, it sounds he's describing a lot of that impulsivity that happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really important point, sort of dealing with the impulsive side, because if we look just as psychophysiologically, what happens when we buy things, we do get that dopamine spike, right? We do get that rush. Now that's interesting. So dopamine's interesting because people are like, oh, but it feels good. Yeah, it feels good, but it's also about habit formation. People forget that. So yes, dopamine is great at giving us that little boost, but it also kind of reinforces that habit. So you need to break that. So what I would say to him is very much kind of give yourself, a budget. He's like, the idea of, so you're allowed this much, you've got to stick to it, and then beyond that, it's a no-go. You can't. So kind of, and the great thing about having no-go areas is you get to fill them up with other things. So it sounds like he's into music. It sounds like he's into cycling. I would say instead of spending time on eBay, join a cycling club. Do something positive. Write some music. See about getting some of that published. See about seeing ways to monetize some of the things that you're doing, or perhaps if you're that into eBay, sell some stuff on, right? So clearly he's got a bunch of stuff he isn't using, but give yourself little goals. Again, we so respond. It's like when we're children, we have those sort of star charts, right?
Yes.
You get a star, and at the end of the week, you get a little prize. Do that, play around those behavioral techniques with yourself and kind of sit down and say to yourself, okay, I'm going to see if I can sell one thing back on eBay by the end of this time. And the next week, make it two, and start turning around. Like you said earlier, get the high from saving rather than spending.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds great. Just little micro goals, and turning the spending into selling, basically, and making money. That would be great. I think that's excellent. We should go back to him, give him those ideas, and then see how he does this time next year.
Yeah. I think it's like we're such creatures of habit, humans, and I think we just need to kind of get into some good habits. Same thing, like of course, you eat well, and once in a while you have some junk food, and that's fine. It's the same thing with spending. As long as you're making 75% good choices, it's okay once in a while.
Yes.
kind of mess up. But if it becomes habitual that you don't know how much you have, you don't think about how much you're spending, well, that's actually potentially really harmful and something that's important to get your head around. And also, just finally, he made the point about his car. And again, these kind of ideas on short-term saves, it's so important to do your homework, because he's right. May have had to spend a bit more sort of getting a better car to start off with, but that would held him in better stead in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much, Linda. Wonderful to have you on the program.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you.
That's great. And that's your lot from us today. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. And our handle is, of course, at MoneyMagpie. If you have a story you'd like us to feature, or you have a burning question, head over to the podcast thread on our message boards. In fact, put a question on any of the message boards, and not only will we answer it, but it might be picked up for the next podcast. We're interested in any of your fab money tips. Today's episode was presented by me, Jasmine Birtles. Our producer was John Offord, and the music was composed for Money Magpie by Thomas Hewitt Jones.